Thanks for pressing play. This is Saints in Cinema. I'm Timothy Winterstein.
And I'm Jay Winterstein.
You can get a hold of us. You can find us on our website, which is the place to go if you want to see all the episodes. saintsandcinema.com. Also, you can send us an email, saintsandcinemapod@gmail.com. I don't remember the last time somebody sent us an email, but you could. You can find us on X and Facebook and Instagram, Jay, and YouTube.
Nice.
Which, if you're watching this, you already know that, but you never know. If you're listening to this and you want to see what we look like for some reason, I don't know why you would want to do that, but if you did, you could find us on
full
YouTube.
Experience.
Yep. So this is episode. What is this?
I like how every time you say that, my mind goes, which episode is this? I think we're in the 80s, right? We're about 85, 88?
This is episode 85. 85 times we have done this, Jay. Which I don't... That's kind of crazy to me. So, episode 85...
just like the first time.
I hope we've done a little bit better than the first time we did it. But so episode 85, we're gonna talk a little bit about season 5 of The Chosen. I don't know about you. I saw the first season. I wrote something about it, I think, for the Jagged Word. I talked to them on their podcast about it, but I haven't watched the season since then.
Wait, you talked to who about the
Jagged Word guys?
Oh, okay. You didn't talk to anyone involved in the making of the show.
No, to clarify, I don't know anyone involved in making the show. But
okay, give us a quick recap of because I don't remember. I'm not familiar with what you mentioned. But what was your thoughts? Just a quick broad overview of what you thought of the first season versus how it's progressed, or any big changes between first season and now that we're on to the 5th season.
Well, I mean, there are some flashbacks in the 5th season to the first season. For me, it just raises a lot of questions, and not bad or good, but a lot of questions about how we think about the Bible, right? Because so I have like kind of these conflicted, totally mixed sort of feelings as I'm watching it, because I'm really struck by some of the things that they do, and I think it's very well made, and also some of the choices to connect certain things. And then other times I'm like, that just seems sort of lame compared to the other stuff. So I kind of have just really mixed feelings about how they did it. And again, the whole thing is well shot. I think most of the acting is pretty good. It's certainly on a different kind of level than a lot of things that people might associate with sort of Christian films or TV. I think that there are a lot of artistic choices that maybe might be a little unexpected if you're sort of and you can I feel like you can tell that they know that those are risks, because there's a lot of explanation that goes on. So I mean, honestly, they could have done a lot of the stuff and just let Jesus' words be Jesus' words and not explain. And I feel like we might be in a little bit more. But you can tell that they've been talking to scholars and academics about these things, because a lot of the explanation that Jesus gives, that the character in the show gives between biblical words, is speculation, or not even necessarily speculation, but just things that I've read in commentaries or whatever about what Jesus is actually saying. So, so there's questions about what he's saying. So they talk about that, and a lot of it comes from scholarship, I think, that's been done. But
well, I think anytime you do something like this, obviously, anytime you're putting the Bible on screen, whether television or film, they know that it's going to get picked apart, and for good reason, because you're putting words into Jesus' mouth. So
right.
It's going to get picked apart, because it should be picked apart, because that's this. This is something.
Yeah, but on the other hand, like what happens is it's kind of interesting. I think if you were to talk to somebody about it, you would probably have people who say that you should not criticize at all what they're doing because it's uplifting or edifying, or even if you put words in Jesus' mouth. I feel like there are some people who are going to be like, "What? Why are you criticizing this? It's so good," you know.
So you're saying it just because of the ends justify the means? Is that kind of where you're going with that? As long as you get people. So is this kind of, I don't know, maybe the justification for your mega churches, I guess, or hey, as long as you can get people in the door, as long as you can get people watching, listening, whatever, then that's the ultimate goal here. And as long as you can get people to watch the show, regardless of maybe how you're getting them there, then it's all for the good.
And I feel like that's sort of a bait and switch. Now, I'm not saying that that's what The Chosen is doing, but along those lines of what you're saying, I think that's what's sort of can happen by people who defend it, right? Like, I think that, although I don't know exactly who all is sort of involved, but so let's say some positives, because I don't want people to think that I think, or that you think, that this is all bad, or that they're doing something wrong. So I have some positives. One, I was kind of surprised, honestly, and actually kind of pleased that they do not mess at all. I mean, no variation from the English, at least from the English translation of the Gospels of Jesus' words at the Last Supper. I mean, now a lot of the things from the season are taken from John's Gospel. A lot of the stuff in the upper room part, Passover part, is from John's Gospel, but the part about the Lord's Supper, like even children's Bibles, there's a Jesus, I think it's called the Jesus Bible, and I'm like with it throughout the whole thing. I like appreciate the whole pointing to Jesus throughout, and then all of a sudden they get to the Lord's Supper, and it's like, what this really means is, and I'm like, what? Why do you have to do that? And so I was honestly a little surprised that the words of Jesus, "This is my body, this is my blood," are left intact in The Chosen. So pleased with that. I also really like the part in the Garden of Gethsemane in the end. Sorry if you haven't seen it, but this has been in the Bible, so it's been around. So I don't think this.
There's no spoilers here.
You can't really call it a spoiler, but this part in the show, at least, where they have Abraham and Isaac, I mean, kind of a powerful theological choice of what Jesus sees in the garden. So that, and then he says my son. Is it supposed to be Joseph? I wasn't quite sure in the last episode. The person who comes and kind of wipes sweat from his brow. One of the Gospels has angels ministering to him, but he says my son to Jesus. And so I'm not 100% sure if that's supposed to be Joseph. I think it'd be strange if it were supposed to be God the Father. That I would find problematic. But anyway, I don't know exactly. But I thought some of the theological choice. I also like the artistic choice overall of interspersing the Last Supper upper room parts with the rest of the kind of the story. So I think there are some interesting choices. But I don't know. Do you have what did you like about it?
Yeah, no, I think we're in agreement on all that stuff. I think it looks good. I think a lot of times when we talk about Christian entertainment, I think one of the things that maybe isn't, they don't spend enough time and money on, is the production or making it artistically good, and I think because a lot of times the message is the focus. So it's nice when you have something like this that has the production. It looks good, and like you mentioned, they have some nice artistic touches to it. I liked how they started each episode with parts of the Last Supper, and then they kind of take it from there. And so it looks good. It has the production, and all that stuff is good to see.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times you have shows like this where it kind of looks cheap and it removes you from the story, and then that's all you can see is you're looking at like the background actors, what are they doing there, how are they acting, and then it just becomes one big distraction from the film.
Yeah, yeah. And there are moments. I'm not a big fan of the actor who plays Pontius Pilate. It seems a little.
Can we talk? Yeah, no, I'd love to. We can talk
Let's
about
do that. Let's talk about that guy. I don't know who he is. I don't know, but
I looked him up. I don't. I think he's done a couple shows or something. Speaking of distracting, that guy was distracting to me. He's got this. He's this feminine. He's weak, I think, which is kind of what they're trying to push here. And whenever I read about Pontius Pilate or hear him, in the story, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that's not who I envision. He seems like like mid-20s, put in this position, but not earned, and he's kind of this, and I don't know the story, I don't know if anybody knows, or how he got in that position, if he was voted in, or I don't know how the process.
Pilate did have some problems. I mean, before Jesus, he had some interaction. He had been recalled to Rome at least once. So there is a little bit of trepidation on the part of the real Pontius Pilate because he's scared of being recalled again. So when I assume there's one more season. When we get to the trial of Jesus, they're going to stretch the final 2 days out to 2 more seasons.
It's scheduled for 7 seasons.
Okay. Well, that's a biblical number, but anyway, so when we get to the trial, I mean, he does not want to lose control of the situation because historically he would have been probably recalled again. A couple things that bother me throughout is kind of anachronistic type things where, how you watch some period pieces and the actors or the haircuts or the way that they talk doesn't fit with what you imagine, right? And so there are a couple things throughout this. So Pontius Pilate is one, but I believe at one point somebody mentions the proletariat. And I think somebody says that about, or something about the people. I think they say proletariat. I mean, okay, there are no Marxists in the first century. The proletariat, that's not a concept and so there are a couple of things like that. And I think in fact, one of the Pharisees says something about tenure. And it's possible that that's a concept that they have in terms of the Sanhedrin, but I don't know. It just seems a little off. And then some of the people, you have a guy named Shamuel. Okay, that sounds to me like a Jewish name, a Hebrew name, but then they call him Jesus. Okay, Jesus, that version of his name is the Greek version. So if you're gonna I feel like you got to pick one. Either pick first century Hebrew sounding names, or pick English translations of the names. And so sometimes throughout the show, this is just as a kind of theological point or biblical point. Either pick names that are from that how they would have sounded in the first century, or just do all together the English translation from the New Testament. And sometimes that messes me up. That distracted me a little bit because you're kind of going back and forth in terms of how the names sound. So I think there's a little bit of anachronism going on where you're not quite. Sometimes I feel like I'm in the first century, and then sometimes I feel like you're doing 21st century entertainment, and that threw me a little bit.
Yeah, it seemed to be the difference when Jesus was speaking, or when he was saying that things that were like specifically out of the Bible. There seemed to be like a fairly clear difference between when he was speaking like that as opposed to anytime Pontius Pilate was talking. There's a few quotes. I think he says "shut up" at one point. Yeah. And then, what was the other quote? I was like, wrote it down. Or Jesus says at some point, he's like, yeah, no problem.
Yeah. I mean, so I feel like it probably, the way that he probably was with his disciples may have been sort of that informal, but that's really hard to translate then into sort of 21st century vernacular. And so it's not that I think that, because I think I know what they're going for. They're going for a less stilted, formal language. They're going for a very sort of familiar, personal language. And I get that, and I understand it. But I think there's probably a way to do it where you are doing it in a way that they would have been informal, rather than the way we would be informal. And so maybe there's a little bit more that needs to be done there in terms of what that would have looked like for them. I don't know. It does seem to go back and forth.
Yeah, and I think I understand where they're trying to go with this, because apparently I heard someone say that one of the reasons that this show is so popular is because of its relatability, and I think that's kind of, and examples like this are where they kind of play into that, and like trying to say, or this whole idea that Jesus was one of us. He's just one of us. Like, this is how he is with his friends. This is how he talked, which I don't know. I always like cringe a little when I see that, and because that's just not. I don't see Jesus as like, oh, he's my best friend, kind of like, hey, let's go hang out, have a couple beers, chill with the boys, kind of Jesus.
Right. And I mean, so this is something that I went back and forth as I'm watching this season, and maybe I need to go back and watch the three in between, or the three in between that I haven't seen. And because there is a tendency probably to elevate Jesus and forget his humanity. And I mean, the fact is, right, like from a theological perspective, no one at that time, he's not wearing, there's no halo. He's not glowing.
Yeah.
He's not, other than the transfiguration, I suppose. But he's not, he would have looked like anyone else. He would have talked the way people talked then. And so I think that it's this very strange kind of line that The Chosen is trying to walk. I mean, it's hard to fault them for this, because you got to make decisions. And this is one of the questions that the whole Enterprise raises for me, is that when I'm reading, right, I'm thinking, okay, well, how did he say this? And I think in my head, well, he could have said it like this, or he could have said it like this. And I don't necessarily, I mean, I sort of have to make a choice as a preacher, let's say. I don't have to make a choice as a reader necessarily. One time I can be like, well, he may have said it like this. Oh, that makes sense for these reasons. Next time I'm like, well, what if he said it like this, though? And it makes sense for these reasons. But the fact is, once you see it, and once you have an actor saying it in a certain way, and in fact, in a lot of cases, interpreting it for us, or, for the disciples, I suppose, in the show, but for us, right? He's interpreting what he's saying. You don't have any room anymore, right? And this is one of the interesting things about a visual art like this. There's no more room for you to think about how it could have been heard, right? And I'm everybody's going to make a decision. I think I maybe mentioned this before, but some professors at the St. Louis Seminary where I attended, they did this thing, a recitation of the Gospel of Mark. And what struck me when I was watching that was how many decisions about how things were said that they have to make. I mean, you don't necessarily if you're just reading the Gospel of Mark, you're not necessarily thinking about this, because you sort of just inherently make a decision automatically. But when you hear it out loud, the decision is made for you. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's an interesting thing when you're interpreting, right? Because everybody interprets. You got to hear it one way, or you got to think of it one way or another way. And so then visually, not only the way it's said, but the body language, right? There's a certain kind of body language, and there's a reaction to it that they show sometimes with the disciples or other people. They show a reaction, and we're meant to sympathize with either how it's said or with the reaction to it. And some decisions are made for you. And I think that's an interesting thing that we should at least consider and think about. What is the impact of that on us reading the Bible, or on how we think about what Jesus is doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is interesting because it does ultimately, it puts a face and it puts the body language there, and it forces us to realize, to think about, how these words were spoken and how they're received. One thing I did appreciate, which maybe I'd heard before, obviously, but one thing I didn't really think about is how much Jesus speaks in parables, and how, and then anytime he gets asked questions, and then he's like, well, let me tell you a story. And then even the disciples in this, in these episodes, they're like, was that a metaphor? They'll huddle up afterwards and they'll say, was that a metaphor? Because he said he was going to, give the bread to
Or
the
Peter
guy
will be preaching, or Peter or somebody else will be out doing the thing, like repeating his parables. It's interesting. I think that was an interesting choice.
Yeah. And I like that, because that was something I guess I'd never really thought about, is that, he does use these stories, and how they're not always going to be received, or how, as soon as someone hears it, they're not going to be like, oh yeah, I know what he's talking about. Because there's multiple times when, it'll talk about the Pharisees. They're like, well, we're not sure really where he's going to go with, where he's going with this, what he's talking about. We need to go huddle up and try and decipher this. Yeah. So that was interesting.
And so I guess everybody's had this experience of, maybe not everybody, but most people have had this experience of reading a book and then seeing a movie, right? In fact, there is a song, no one is going to know this reference, but there's a song by this band called Whiteheart, and it's called, the chorus is something like, read the book, don't wait for the movie. I think that's how the chorus goes. A Christian band from like the early 90s or late 80s. Yeah. It might be the late 80s. Late 80s, early 90s. And
funny.
Like, read the book, don't wait for the movie.
Wait, did you literally just think of that, or you've been sitting on that one, holding on to that one for a minute?
Well, every time I think about it did occur to me when I was watching in the first couple episodes, because, right, so everybody's had this experience where they've read a book and they've watched a movie and they're like, this matched up, this didn't. It happened with the Lord of the Rings, now it's relatively long ago, but where people who loved the Lord of the Rings and kind of created this imaginary world, and then they see it recreated on the screen, and that's not what I imagine at all, or that is what I imagine. This has happened to me with the Amazon series Bosch. I read the books, and Titus Welliver is Harry Bosch for me. He matches, his house matches, everything he does matches exactly sort of and that probably has to do with the author being involved in those shows, and I guess they didn't get God involved with The Chosen, but
busy.
Come on, get the author involved. Luke and Matthew and Mark, they're like, yeah, we're not
involved with that anymore. We've distanced ourselves from the production.
You guys do what you want, but it's public domain.
It's public domain by now.
So I think that probably is partly the case, right? This is how I imagined it, or this is how I did not imagine it that way. But what it really gets to is interpretation, and I think that's at the heart of this. And it happened to me with the first season. There are certain things that I believe should be interpreted in certain ways, and they chose other interpretations, which are not invalid, right? They're not like, oh, that couldn't have happened. You got to fill stuff in when you're putting it on the screen. In a book, you don't have to fill in those gaps. I'm sure that anybody who's adapted a book to a screenplay, to a film, or to a series knows and has experienced the fact that you got to figure out, okay, well, it says this, but how do they get from there to there, or whatever the case may be. So you have gaps in written stuff that you can't have on the screen because you can't like just skip. I mean, I suppose you can. You can have a jump cut, I suppose. But you usually don't just skip from one thing to another because you got to kind of fill out the narrative. But you can't do that on... So there's gaps necessarily filled in. And obviously The Chosen does that. Every biblical thing that's ever been made has done that. You filled in gaps. You explain things, interpreted things, etc. So...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of maybe the strengths and the weaknesses is how they try and put everything in context and how it affected everyone around Jesus, because that's what we don't necessarily get in the Bible is how was each person affected when this happened, when Jesus did this, when Jesus said this. We get little bits and pieces. So I think the show in trying to examine that or go after that a little more, I think that's one of the strengths of the show. But then also maybe a weakness is that maybe if you go a little too far and try and say, well, we don't really have much on this guy, so we're going to create a couple scenes and this is where we're going to go with that. And where for Pontius Pilate, I don't think it really worked for that character. I think he's more of a distraction in the show. So I think I appreciated that they're trying to do that and give some context from everyone else. But then at the same point, it doesn't always work for me.
Yeah. And some of that, there's differences. Like I said earlier, you don't necessarily have to fill in. You guys know what I'm saying, right? Several times Jesus will do something like that. The character will do something like that where you wouldn't necessarily... He doesn't, at least in the words we have in the Bible, he doesn't do that. So I think some of that is... Well, here's a way to understand that, which again is not necessarily a problem because people do that all the time, biblical interpreters or preachers or whomever. But you still have to reckon with the fact that once you put it on the screen, I mean, this is an interesting, I think, consideration or discussion to have is what is the difference between reading something and putting it on the screen? And there is a difference. And I'm not sure that we who are used to sort of watching so much stuff, the screens haven't been around for very long relative to the history of the world, right? So once you do that, it changes and it sets kind of in a sense, it sets in stone a certain way of viewing that. And I think that this is not a small consideration when we're considering something like the Bible, at least for Christians. I mean, I suppose for unbelievers, this is probably not a major point and nobody cares. But for Christians, it matters, right? Like we hold this to be, the Word of God. And I don't think there's anything that necessarily contradicts Christian belief. It's not that. It's not that there's something that contradicts it. It's that it sets into on the screen a particular way that Jesus says stuff or a particular interpretation of what Jesus says. And again, it might be right or wrong. That's not really the point. The point is you have to reckon with it in a way you don't when you're reading it.
You think people are going to be, moving forward, they're going to have, what's his name, Jonathan Rumi or whatever, that they're going to have, they'll go back to the Bible and they'll read stuff and, well, they didn't say this in The Chosen, so I don't know.
I saw a meme.
You need to, what?
I saw a meme that says, it was something like, well, I don't read the Bible that much, but I've seen The Chosen. And so, I mean, that's kind of what you're saying. Like, some people are going to have, so some people are going to go to the Bible and they're going to read the Gospels because of this. Other people are not going to. They're just going to have this idea, right? Someone on Amazon who just scrolling through and just finds this and just watches something, not necessarily going to read the Bible about it.
Okay, so I read that the show has been watched by an estimated 280 million people worldwide, and a third of whom were not quote unquote religious. I guess
how do they test that?
Yeah, I don't know. They surveyed 280
I don't think
million.
It's in my Amazon profile.
I don't know. No one asked me. I don't know how they numbers. I'm just quoting Wikipedia source something. But so this is just what it says. So going back to that, you are going to have these people that, or maybe they're substituting the chosen for church. Like, I don't need to go to church. I'm learning more by watching The Chosen than I am from this church that I used to go to. Yeah. I'm learning more about Jesus here than I am if I'd go to church. And substituted The Chosen for the Bible, for the actual Word of God, I think. And I think you get down to, it's a slippery slope from there. But then on the other hand...
I read... I'll say this about an experience I had. I feel like we went to Sunday school. We went to church every week. Like, I mean, we were not getting away with staying home on Sunday morning, right, Jay? Like, I remember...
But Mom, we're going to watch The Chosen. It's okay. We don't need to go.
Right.
We'll stay home, but we'll watch The Chosen.
I'm going to watch the Ten Commandments.
All right.
Ben-Hur, right? Ben-Hur's in the Bible, isn't he?
We just pick a different biblical movie each week. Yeah. We're not going to go to church. It's the same thing. We're getting Jesus.
I mean, this is an actual thing after COVID, right? Where so many things were live streamed. Because, and the thing about it is, okay, this is totally separate from The Chosen. But
sorry, I cut you off, and I wanted to get back to where you're going. I don't know if we're...
First of all, now you've got me on this as a pastor. This whole it's becoming it's an issue, right? Where we, because of, and mainly during COVID, it was televangelists, whatever that was happening, but it was not so widespread as it became during COVID when there were sort of decisions made and enforced about who could meet, etc. But you know what? If you watch it online and you sit at home, for one, you're probably going to do what I do when I watch shows, which is pick up my phone, look at it, get distracted, miss parts, have to rewind, whatever. Yeah. But also, besides that, you don't have to deal with the messiness of other people. And I think there's a real temptation for people. Sure. Christians, regardless of what people say or what they say, they're all sinners, and it's all going to be messy when you actually have to interact with other people. It's not messy if you can sit by yourself and you can watch something on a screen in your home. That's not messy. That's sort of, at least, well, it should probably be messy because you're there. But right, totally side issue from this. But but I remember a very specific point at which I actually read the story of David and Goliath. I remember this when I was in high school. So you kind of know if you grow up in church, you kind of know the stories in general. You know about Jonah, and even if you think it's a whale, Jonah, you kind of know the stories. You know basic idea of something about Abraham or Moses or whatever. But I remember reading the actual words in the Bible about David and Goliath, and how much different, or at least how much color it added that I didn't realize was there. And there are things that struck me about actually reading the text, that I may not have seen if I let someone else sort of kind of interpret everything. Now, I think there's probably some sense to the fact that there have been certain interpretations of things in line with other, whole stories of the scriptures. But I don't know. Once you put it on the screen, there's something fundamental that has changed, and I think that's at least some people are probably going to dismiss that and say, well, that who cares, whatever, because we're so used to seeing things on the screen. But I think it's something fundamental that we should consider, the difference between reading something and seeing it, and your visual, ocular experience of something is different from reading it or speaking it. So
I think ideally, I don't know if they'd say this, but the filmmakers or the producers or whatever, I think they would like to say, hey, what we're doing is we're giving little bits and pieces, and what that's going to do is going to bring people back to the Bible. And once they see this, then they'll want to read the Bible. I think it's, it sounds like that's a bit idealistic, true. But I think that's one way to look at it. Again, is like, hey, we'll do whatever we can just to get people in, and then, let God take it from there. But yeah, no, I like what you're saying about, once you've seen it, it's kind of hard to go back. I mean, I don't know, the first time you see a painting of Jesus, that's kind of like, oh, that's Jesus. That's what Jesus looks like. So it kind of sticks with you. Okay, on that note, I don't necessarily love this Rumi guy, the Jesus. There's a bit of a silly look to him. And okay, I think the first time I saw him was in that other film we talked about a while back, where he's the when they start the church in Costa Mesa.
Oh, right. I had seen the first. So
you saw the season. You saw him as Jesus before seeing him as like this,
what was
the
the name
guy.
What was the name of the movie?
I don't know.
We talked about it.
But so in that movie, that we'll get the name here in just a second. He's kind of like a hippie guy, and I see him more as that hippie guy look when he's Jesus. I don't know. He's Jesus Revolution.
Okay.
So he plays Lonnie Frisbee. He's kind of like a bit of the new age kind of hippie kind of guy in there, the loose going kind of guy, and which I think fits his look. And then so seeing him as Jesus, I don't know. He just didn't work for me as a Jesus, and maybe that's a personal thing. Maybe if I'd watched season 1 and I'd seen him there first, then I wouldn't feel the same way. He's almost got like this half smile going at times. Going back to that, hey, I just want to be your friend. Hey, let's just hang out. Grab some beer. That's what he looks like.
I do think this is one thing. So I'm generally in agreement on that. That, by the way, was episode 59. That was a long time. How long ago was that? That was in 2023. July of 2023, we recorded that episode with Ryan Spacone on Jesus Revolution. But I think generally I'm in agreement, but there are moments where he pulls it back when people start to get a little too, other characters in the show start to get either a little too familiar or a little too, they think they know what's going on and they don't. I feel like Rumi pulls it back a little bit. And he gets his edges start to get a little sharper. So I appreciated some of those moments where it's not quite as lighthearted or silly. There are moments, but generally I see what you're saying.
Okay, one of the other things I guess that I didn't love, if we're gonna go on that theme, is the pacing was a little bit slow for me. I mean, it's there's 8 episodes. They're close to an hour each, so that's almost 7.5, 8 hours here, and it goes from the Last Supper to Judas kissing Jesus in almost 8 hours. So I don't know, it was a little sluggish. I felt like at points I was like,
I mean, from the biblical timeline, they do have sort of triumphal entry, Palm Sunday type stuff. So that's, you're kind of flashing back and forth, right? So again,
yeah,
like I said at the beginning, I like the artistic choice to frame it around and kind of intersperse the Passover meal parts, and so it goes from the triumphal entry to the Garden of Gethsemane. So that means that really 2 seasons are going to cover from the time that Jesus is arrested to what I suppose you could go to his ascension. That might make 2 seasons, but if you're going to make 2 seasons,
I don't know,
basically out of 3 days, that seems rough.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and I think it got a little bogged down with a lot of the dialogue. I think there was a little too much. I want more action. It's like, put him on the cross. Come on, crucify. No, I didn't say that. But I think there was...
All right.
I felt like they just pushed the dialogue, pushed the characters.
There's a lot of explanation.
A lot of the side characters that maybe didn't need as much.
You got to connect.
Time.
I mean, they're bringing in Nicodemus, who does appear twice in John's gospel, but I mean, you're really pushing it to make him sort of a major thing, and then you have really a lot of explanation and a lot of the filling in the background of the Sanhedrin, as well as with Caiaphas, and
even like some Judas, little Judas background, trying to maybe just to help to explain his motives.
Yeah, right. And I guess I didn't mind that as much. I feel like it makes sense sort of in the context, because I mean the Gospels continually say one of the 12, and I think that we are meant to hear that as very striking, like surprising. How is it that one of Jesus' hand-picked disciples is the one who sort of betrays him and gets this going? And so I think we are meant to hear that in the gospel. So I guess for that part I didn't mind as much filling in sort of Judas going back and forth, right? Some of that is the scholarship that I talked about, where people are speculating about the fact that Judas wanted to like kickstart the bringing of the kingdom, and so there's some of that in there, where, right, Judas thinks in the that, I mean, this is the thing about the Bible. Very rarely are we giving any insight into what people are thinking or feeling, right?
Yeah.
There is what people say, and there's what they do, and sometimes not even that much, but there's very rarely. I mean, sometimes it will say Jesus knew what they were thinking or something like that, but we don't get a lot of, what were they thinking about this? How do they feel about what they were doing? There's no, that's not there. There's not that kind of omniscience from the sort of gospel narrators. And so they're filling a lot of that, and depending on how you feel about what they're doing, you may or may not.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to all that. I think it's a few points they probably just go a little too far, and but then
too much, maybe,
And I'm sure that they're talking to religious leaders and they're getting feedback on this, and I don't think they're just they're just I don't think they just put anything out there. Oh, what if he said this? That'd be funny, ha ha ha. No, and I'm sure
no, I agree.
There's a lot of standard and for basis for what they're saying and how they're saying it. But then at the end of the day, they're still guessing, based on what it is. So
when we read this stuff, we're asking questions. We're like, well, wait a second. How did it get to the fact that, like, why would Judas do this? So, it's not that the questions are bad or wrong. It's just that you have one possible, right? Again, once you put it on the screen, that's the possibility. There's no other possibility once you do
right.
that. And
you're not saying, what if he did this? What if he did this? You're saying this is what he...
Because this is how we're seeing it visually.
Right.
If you watch somebody cross the street, it's not like you could say, well, maybe they didn't cross the street. I mean, it's
I
right
saw
there.
it on the show.
I saw
it.
Yeah,
I saw it happen.
We should be asking the question, what changes for us when these are depicted on the screen? And it's not just The Chosen. It's any number of things. So things like, you got Aronofsky doing Noah, and we're like, whoa, no, that's not, wait, what? Well, I mean, things in The Chosen are put in different orders, or you have Jesus saying things at points at which in the Bible that's not the order that they're in, right? So I think Christians ought to be a little bit more like careful when we're like, well, criticize, that's bad, stupid, wrong, and then we're like, well, this is good. Well, why?
Yeah.
I just think we should interrogate more carefully and closely the reasons why we're agreeing or disagreeing with something. And there may be valid things there, but we shouldn't just be, well, this is because, this is edifying and there's no bad stuff, as however we define that. And so we just go along with it because of that. I think we ought to So finally, what should happen is anybody who watches this, Christian otherwise, should go to the Gospels and be like, what do the Gospels say? And it doesn't erase all the difficulties. The Gospels are not lockstep. Why do we have 4 of them, not one of them, right? So it's not as if there's an absolute perspective where we have one perspective and that's it. But I think anyone who watches it should go to the Gospels and be like, what do the Gospels say? Let's compare that. Let's see, and maybe that's the way it did happen, or maybe there's some other possibility. And I think that's probably the proper way to evaluate anything that depicts something from a sacred story.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is that people really need to, have both of them. You can't just go in and say, I watched The Chosen, I know what happens in the Bible. You need to have, you have to go to the source material, and you need to be able to compare and look at both of them and say, why did they make these decisions? I think this may have been the wrong decision. I think this may have been the right decision, but understand where they're coming from and why they did what they did.
And I think that could be fruitful, right? Like that.
Sure.
That way of approaching it could be fruitful for Christians re-examining things. Like maybe they depict something, you're like, wait, I never thought about it that way, and so you could very easily go back and examine and sort of reconsider things. I think that the danger is that one, like I talked about, well, so this is kind of what I wrote about. I was reading Paul Schrader's book, The Transcendental Style in Film, right? And is that what it's called? Transcendental Style?
Transcendental. Yeah, it's on my bookshelf.
So in that book, he makes this very interesting point. And it's about the showing of miracles, right? Because slow cinema, transcendental style is about not directly showing that kind of transcendent thing, right? and the reason is, according to Schrader, is that you don't show that because there are tricks that are used in filmmaking that people sort of inherently know that it's a trick. And so when Jesus does a miracle on screen, that's not real, right? Because it's on screen. You know that there's some cinematic trick that's been used. And so I think this is a kind of compelling point. Maybe you can't show everything because maybe people will automatically think that that's not a real thing. That's a cinematic trick. And so I think that's one thing that we should consider, along with the difference between showing something on the screen and reading about it. Those are just 2 of the questions that are raised for me by watching it. And obviously, there have been biblical epics that have been made for a very long time and put on film. And if you watch the 10 Commandments, how long is that? And it covers only a very short period of time in the Bible. So there's 2 hours of stuff that's not in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And so people don't get mad about that. It's like, this is a classic. This is good. Noah or whatever, that's bad. Well, okay, they're doing similar things. And we should recognize the difference between reading the Bible and watching something on the screen. And sometimes I worry about Christians that we don't necessarily recognize that difference.
Yeah. So what do you think? So I guess the question ultimately is, what do you think this does for quote unquote Christian entertainment, Christian films, Christian television? Because I think when we had, back in 2004, when we had The Passion of the Christ, that was a huge moment for Christian entertainment. Just the production, the style, the acting.
R-rated film ever.
Yeah, it had it all. For me, it kind of peaked. And then I don't know. We took a couple steps back, and then
yeah.
I don't know. Where do you think that The Chosen fits in with this whole entertainment / Christian entertainment? Is this a good Christian show, or is this just a good show? What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good question. I don't know if I necessarily have an answer. I mean, I think that the Passion of the Christ deserves a little bit more credit for its artistic choices than sometimes it's gotten based on various other criteria. But in other words, like we talked about this, the Passion of the Christ versus the Last Temptation of Christ. I think, check that episode out if you're interested. But
okay, quick question. Sorry, just insert. Yeah. I know. Hold on to that thought. Do you think this show is doing more for Christianity than the Passion of the Christ?
I think it's definitely more approachable or accessible. I don't know. I mean, honestly, a lot of these things that people get marketed and they sell out theaters, and I mean, The Chosen has been in theaters. Like this season, they had theaters where you could watch episodes of this season. So, but I am not convinced that a lot of, say, unbelievers are like going to these events. Like, I don't know if
a third of 280 million.
Okay, on Amazon number? Maybe, but I don't know that applies to the theater and honestly, again, I mean, tell me where you got the numbers. Or like, who said I'm an unbeliever, I'm watching The Chosen?
Check.
I mean, that's one. Okay. I don't know where are you getting where do the numbers come from? I mean, again, it's not in my Amazon profile. I don't think. I don't think I had to mark off whether I was a Christian or not. So James gonna look it up here in a minute. But
before you watch this show, you have to declare your religious affiliation.
I feel like most of the time, because I think what's happening. New York Times said what?
On March 2nd. Oh, shoot. Oh, it's behind a paywall.
Dang it. Paywalls.
Now we'll never know.
I don't. What's the source? I think we like to think that something makes a lot of money or that means that necessarily a lot of that's making a big impact. I don't know. I feel like a lot of unbelievers are skeptical about anything that might try to proselytize, and so. But I mean, I don't know. Who knows? People sometimes are interested in things that they don't really know about, right? So it's possible. I'm not denying that's a possibility. I don't know. I think it does look good. I agree. Christians ought to be making the best of the best, right? We shouldn't be copying the trend. We shouldn't be, well, they made this and it's popular, so we'll make something that will copy that and it'll be popular. I mean, this happens so much with music.
It does seem like that. Every time there's like a good Christian entertainment, it's like, oh wow, this is as good as quote secular. Right. Fill in the blank.
Right.
Well, it's never
that's stupid.
Groundbreaking Christian.
I mean, honestly.
Entertainment. So
the films that I would hold, and I've probably beat this dead horse 85 times, but my favorite films that I think are the most profound theologically are films that are not, no churches are buying out theaters to see A Hidden Life. No churches are buying out theaters to see Silence, which, again, I mean, this is a film that this will mess you up. And I think maybe that's the reason, is because we don't want things that'll mess us up. We want things that will reaffirm us in the convictions we already have. And so that, or my favorite film, Calvary, right? We're not selling out theaters for these kinds of movies because they're not simple enough. Now, I think The Chosen there are some wrinkles, there are some layers, but I'm not sure that it goes beyond the sort of simple thing that, and I think that's the reason for a lot of the explanation that the character of Jesus does in the show, is that if you kind of leave some stuff that's gonna mess with you, you might that might be too much for people. So I don't know. I go back and forth, but
it's too bad. Yeah, it is. I don't know what the easy answer is for that. I mean,
I think we can be sort of pleased with the production value. I think that the acting, those sorts of things, I think we can be, this is not, people know what they're doing, right? Like that.
Yeah.
Like, so I think that we ought to know what we're doing, but also take some risks in the sense that people might be confused, and it might drive you actually. In other words, it's not so on the nose that you're like, okay, I get it. But
maybe it goes back to being able to get something made. If producers have the option of, hey, pushing the boundaries, getting a little crazy, and then the producers will be like, well, we can't get that film made. Nobody's going to finance that. Okay, well, let's get something a little more palatable. And then they see something like The Chosen and see how popular it's been. It's making money. I mean, it was, what was it? It was the most successful crowdfunded TV show in history. So maybe, I don't know if you want to call them baby steps, but hey, look how well this one did. Now maybe on the next show or maybe the next film,
baby steps to the door, baby steps to the elevator, baby steps.
What are you talking about?
What about Bob? Come on, man.
My bad.
It's a hilarious. You gotta know what about Bob reference. Okay. Anyway, so
but I think, maybe they'll be able to show producers or financiers that, hey, look how well this one did. Now let's just push it a little farther.
I mean, so that's the business side of it, right? Like you gotta have people who are willing to fund the thing that you want to do, and obviously there's funding behind this because if there weren't, it wouldn't look good, right?
Yep.
You gotta get the cameras, you gotta get the technicians, you gotta get the talent, you have to get those, and you gotta pay them, right? So I think we can accept that there's a business side of this that is not entirely evil. I mean, there's probably some negative things to it, but in this world, what is there not a negative side to? So, I mean, I don't know. I guess overall that means that it's a mixture. It's a kind of amalgamation of things that are good and things that are positive and things that are maybe questionable or at least can be questioned. So again, this is sort of my thing. I don't know if this is good or bad, but these are questions that people should be asking. And we shouldn't just, because it's a Christian thing or because it's a Jesus thing, we shouldn't be, it's automatically good. Yes. I think that's a danger, right? So we can maybe, and it's maybe because we're used to treating the Bible that way, which again, I treat the Bible that way. Like, that's not the problem. It's that when things are associated with the Bible or connected to the Bible, then that must be good too, right? I'm interested in what people think. Like, I think there's room for on this because it's such a well-made thing. Tell us what you think. You can send us an email, Saints Cinema Pod. You can go to our website, listen to this and all the episodes there. YouTube for the last 3 or 4 or 5 episodes. X, Facebook, Instagram. Wherever. Listen to us wherever you get your podcast, and we'll see what happens. I think probably next time will be our... Will next time be our...
Yeah, dude,
say preview.
Say it.
Preview of our favorite week of the year.
Yes. All right, thanks for listening.